I really couldn't think of a more appropriate comment and idea to kind of transition into my presentation. I think I've been so inspired by today, and thank you to all the guests and speakers and everybody for their contribution. I feel, I'm going to leave this room with lots of ideas that we can move to impact. I feel like we're all agents of change here. So in line with some of the conversations that we've been having, particularly this afternoon, I wanted to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about the role that entrepreneurship, and more specifically entrepreneurs, the role that we can play in contributing to peace and prosperity. And so to do this, I'm going to celebrate 3 agents of change, 3 principled leaders, 3 peacemakers that I have been honored to meet during my time at MIT. And I'm going to celebrate their stories, but I'm also going to try and tease out some of the leadership traits that we've all kind of been mentioning over the last few hours. And then I also want to, I'm going to end my presentation by kind of teasing out the role that entrepreneurship educators can play in inspiring and educating change agents. But first, I did want to just introduce myself briefly. So I'm the executive director of the Legatum Center, and essentially what I do is I'm dedicated to serving entrepreneurs who are building and scaling businesses in emerging markets. I'm also a senior lecturer at MIT, which means that I'm very, very interested in the role that we as entrepreneurship educators can play in driving that change and educating people on the values, and also equipping entrepreneurs with the skill set that they can take with them to build successful and principled businesses. I'm also mother to this wonderful little girl here, and I feel like an introductory slide is just not doesn't represent me without showing my family. And with that, I did want to just tell a short story myself. So this conference reminded me of a letter that I'm actually writing to my little girl, Penelope Penny. And it's inspired by a very cheesy YouTube video that you may or not have seen, where I asked my family and friends to write a letter to Penny for her 2nd birthday that I'm going to open on her 18th birthday, rather than a gift. We have way too many plastic toys. So I've received letters from near and far, from grandparents, from aunts and uncles, from cousins. But interestingly, I've actually found it quite hard to write a letter myself. And why? And I think despite only being a mum for 2.5 years, I feel like I've got so much to share, so much advice that I want to give my little girl. And my ultimate goal is for her to be happy and for her to inflict happiness on others. And I think the speakers we've heard from today have certainly achieving that goal. But what framework and values can you teach a young child so that they can kind of embed that and make it their purpose to follow this dream? So I actually, when I received the invitation to come and speak, I was excited because it kind of, the light switch went off, and I thought, wow, you know what, I work with these amazing change agents every single day at my job with MIT, and seeing these entrepreneurs go and build and scale incredible businesses around the world. How about using that as an opportunity to share some lessons for my daughter? So with that, I'm going to start with this story about Joseph. Joseph is from northern Nigeria, the same town where 276 females were kidnapped by the Boko Haram in 2014. And he came to Lagos, Nigeria, in search of a better life for himself and his family. I met Joseph while visiting Nigeria, Lagos, this summer. And I was visiting a company called Max. Max is a startup based in the Yaba region, for those of you who have been to Lagos, a very cool place. And what essentially Max is they're a last mile delivery company. So what that means for a restaurant that's in Lagos City, they will call Max and Max will deliver that product, some hot food, to a hungry person on the other side of the city. What that means for a bank is that they'll call Max and they'll ask Max to deliver a bank card securely to a customer. What that means for an individual is that I can send cash to a friend in a secure and safe way. And but what blew me away when meeting Joseph, who works for Max and who's a delivery driver for Max, is that Max is far more than just a company serving restaurants and banks and e-commerce companies in Lagos City. You know, I would say that from the inside, you could be in Silicon Valley. It looks like a typical startup. Post-it notes on the wall, ramen noodles in the cupboard. You overhear sales calls, you overhear computer scientists discussing the next cool algorithm that they plan to build. And then when you step outside, you see and realize the scale of the challenge that Max is trying to solve. For anyone who's been to Lagos, this picture is probably very familiar to you. It takes 3 to 4 hours to drive 20 kilometers. And this is a city that's urbanizing at record speeds. 21 million citizens currently live in Lagos, and 80 people arrive per day to seek opportunities. And at the moment, there are not enough jobs. And we've talked about the importance of jobs and how that can lead to disaster. And so what is Max doing to help solve this problem? Well, they're actually tackling this challenge in a very innovative way, because last mile delivery in Lagos doesn't just mean that I get hot food in 30 minutes. That means that small micro businesses across the city can reach more customers. That means that their existence depends on better infrastructure within the city of Lagos. And so what they're doing is providing, it's a very simple innovation, motorcycles around the city so that they can weave around traffic, innovative kind of boxes that keep food warm and bank cards safe, champions, they're motorcycle drivers who do the deliveries. And there's incredible incentives involved and engaged. The picture of Joseph I showed you, he was wearing a very cool jacket, leather jacket. He was so proud to be a motorcycle driver for Max. And this is in a place where motorcycle driving is one of the worst professions that you can go into. It's disrespected. Many people can get licenses regardless of their ability to drive. It's not like Uganda where you jump on a boda and you can go wherever you want. And so what Max has done is brought respect to a profession. How have they done that? They've created psychometric testing for the drivers, these smart algorithms that link the psychometric tests to the way that the motorcycle drivers drive. They've used technology to create route optimization around the city. Google Maps isn't a thing there in the same way that it is here or in Boston. They've also created a system for geotagging addresses. So this means that, in Lagos, addresses, again, they don't exist in the same way as they do here. So Max, when they finally discovered where to deliver a package, they geotag and they collect that data. So they're literally building a map of Lagos from the bottom up. And I'm telling this story because this represents what entrepreneurship is all about. There is a human element to it and an economic element. There is human impact and there's economic impact. There's the world-class training that Max provides their motorcycle drivers. The health and safety, they provide helmets for every single driver that's part of their network. They pay 2 times the income. They provide career growth, 0% loans. That means that Joseph, in 1 year's time, will own that motorcycle driver. And I talked to the founder. He doesn't care if Joseph leaves the company after that. He can use that motorcycle to taxi people around and to provide more income for himself and his family. They provide health insurance. The founders are principled leaders that have built, they don't have to do this, but they've built the infrastructure into the business because number one, it makes business sense. You want to be able to trust the champions that deliver your packages, but they also care. They're mission-driven entrepreneurs. On the economic side, $1 million in sales last year, 20% growth month to month, and that's leading to 100 jobs. These guys have existed for 2.5 years. 100 jobs already created in Lagos, 6,000 indirect jobs created. Those are the small to medium-sized businesses that they're serving and helping to deliver their products. And that means 50,000 lives already impacted by two, because they're co-founder entrepreneurs. I'm not going to go into the founder's story, but I did just want to highlight the path that Adeteyo Momodaro, the founder of Max, took. He grew up in Lagos. We were talking about understanding a problem. He's identified and experienced this problem from within Lagos. He did come to MIT to pursue his entrepreneurial dreams, and in between, he worked for the oil sector, where he became increasingly frustrated by the wealth of the oil sector and the 99% of the GDP going directly to the 1%, and wanted to change that, and saw entrepreneurship as an opportunity to do that. My second story is about Veronica. Veronica is on the right here. Veronica lives in Kibera, which is one of the largest slum communities in Nairobi, Kenya. And she is one of 2 million people within the slums of Kenya alone. And she's a sales manager for a company called Soko. Soko is an ethical fashion brand. I'm actually modeling some of their jewelry today. But Soko is not just a fashion brand. What they do is they work with artisans across the slums of Nairobi, artisans who are highly skilled in making handmade brass jewelry. And what Soko does through a simple mobile phone is connect these artisans with designers in San Francisco who know the market in America. And they send through this kind of smart ERP system the designs to these artisans across, you're talking 2,500 artisans across Nairobi, decentralized. And they send the designs, they can make payments through the mobile phone. And with that, they're able to create these beautiful handmade designs at competitive costs to other jewelry makers. Now, from what the consumer sees, what you and I would see, is this beautiful ethical brand, Soko. Beautiful handmade jewelry that's usually sold for hundreds of dollars, and believe me, it is affordable. On the back end, you see this virtual factory. And what I mean by that is this decentralized group of artisans across Nairobi who are able to connect with these designers through mobile phone. But what Veronica sees is what's most important. Veronica sees 25% of the revenue that is created from me buying this necklace. Now, let's put that into perspective. The average fair trade company gives 5% back to the artisan, Soko 25%. This is revenue. This is not profit, this is revenue. And let's remember that the average amount that goes back to the artisan is less than 1%. Retail accounts for about 1/6 of the jobs on our planet. And the average earning for a factory worker working in a retail company in China is about 50 cents a day. So you can see that Soko they're not just an ethical fashion brand, they are literally changing the way we're thinking about the manufacturing of this jewelry through a decentralized system. And it's not just Veronica that they're impacting. There are hundreds of people now. There are 85 people who work directly for Soko and their team. This is a picture that I took when I was visiting them this summer, the baby shower that they were hosting for one of their employees. People like to work for Soko, from the artisans like Veronica to the people on their sales team, the founders, all female, 3 female co-founders are dedicated to training women within the company. Veronica is actually one of the few females who started with Soko, because most of the people that they were working with originally, most of the artisans were male who had been trained by nonprofits in the city to make brass jewelry. But through Soko's dedication to capacity building, internal capacity building, they were able to train people like Veronica, who, by the way, is now a sales manager, and they've literally brought her out of poverty and her family. And Ella here had a similar journey to Teo. Ella's the founder. She was driven by passion, committed to solving this problem of helping these artisans in Nairobi, and has now been living in Nairobi for 5 years. And within 5 years, they've made $25 million in revenue. Last year, they made $3.5 million alone. And by the way, only 5% of women founders end up making more than $1 million in revenue. And Ella has made $3.5 million already in the last year. And it's through her mission-driven effort that she's been able to kind of build this organization. My final story is about Mithala. She is from Monterrey, Mexico. So we're moving from the continent of Africa to the country of Mexico. And she is one of 11 million people in Mexico that suffers from diabetes. Without access to high quality care, Mithala was very close to committing suicide. And this was before she came across a company called Clínicas del Azúcar that's based in Monterrey, Mexico. Javier, the founder, who was just visiting me last week, and I was so inspired by his model. He spent the last 7 years building 2 clinics in Monterrey, Mexico. And what he's done is taken an innovative approach to an old problem, which is healthcare. And what he's done is you arrive in a Clínicas del Azúcar. It's kind of like a pharmacy in a mall. You arrive, you say that you are interested in getting tested for diabetes, and then you kind of go to these stations. They check your feet, they check your eyes, they take a blood test. Then you move on to a nutritionist, and the nutritionist gives you advice on how and what food to eat. Then you move on to a doctor, and you spend only 10 minutes with the doctor, but that's all you need to get the drugs to go on and live a healthy life. Javier has created a business model around this where they charge a very low subscription fee for the year, and he's able to provide incredibly high quality care for the fraction of the cost, in fact 70% less than what the government spends currently in Monterrey for serving people with diabetes care. 45% of the people that come in and get his free screening stay with the Clínicas del Azúcar and pay the subscription fee, which allows him to sustain the business. The rest, they get the free screening, and then they go to the government clinics, and they get served there. But that is a win for Javier, because at least they've had the free screening, and they're able to access the care that they need. Javier now has, I mentioned that a year ago, he'd managed to get these 2 clinics in Monterrey right. But within the last year, he's set up 11 clinics, and he's opening 1 clinic a year. And when I asked him to describe his business model, he literally said it's the McDonald's of healthcare. And he's right. You know, he's applied this very interesting model, the assembly line, to a service. And he's serving low-income communities in Monterrey. And the thing that he emphasized to me was this is high-quality care. This is better care than otherwise he could provide through any other method. Now, I've told 3 stories, but these stories represent many of the students that come through the Legatum Center. Legatum means legacy in Latin, and we believe that entrepreneurship creates a legacy for the individual to share their impact with the world. But I think the main point I'm trying to make here is that entrepreneurs like Javier, like Ella, like Teo, they're agents for change. And that's social and economic. You know, these entrepreneurs are not just addressing some of the greatest challenges of all time, as articulated by the SDGs, but they're creating jobs. Jobs that will drive people out of poverty. This is a chart that I pulled, this is US data, that shows net job growth over time. And this proves that jobs come from entrepreneurs. This proves that jobs come from new businesses, not corporates. So this is net job growth over time. The dark blue represents jobs created by new businesses in the United States, entrepreneurs. The light blue represents corporates and large institutions. And you can see that net job growth is coming from the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders. And I think more than that is they're building the underlying infrastructure to support social and economic development. They're creating platforms for change. Adateo, through Max, is not just creating his licensing program that is making it, which is kind of at the core of what makes the business successful. He is now being approached by the government because the government wants to purchase his psychometric testing and his process for motorcycle licensing to improve the way that the city provides licenses. Ella is providing training for artisans, asset financing so they can purchase better equipment, and they're building out their own studios, their art studios. They're literally building the underlying infrastructure. They're going well beyond what makes sense for just core profit. And they're not just creating jobs, they're creating good jobs. They're paying their employees fair wages, not just fair wages, but what's right. They're paying 3-5 times more than the industry standard, not because there's any kind of business reason behind it, because it's the right thing to do. They're providing health insurance when they don't have to, helmets. Each of their headquarters has 24-hour access to power and the internet that their employees can access anytime. You know, these are principled leadership strategies that really make a difference, because these are mission-driven leaders. They don't just care about profit, although profit is important for them to keep their business sustainable, but the mission, the profits drive the mission. The mission isn't about the profits, it's about the profits driving the mission. And I think finally, to kind of tie these entrepreneurs together, is that they're building sustainable and scalable solutions. Entrepreneurship isn't about serving one patient, one artist, one motorcycle driver. Entrepreneurship is about creating a sustainable way to have impact that will go beyond Ella, will go beyond Teo, will go beyond Javier if they build the business in the right way. And I think this is what's important. And one of the points that I want to make here is it's not about the entrepreneurship, it's about the entrepreneur behind the venture. Every enterprise, behind every enterprise is an entrepreneurial leader. And I've pulled out 3 leadership characteristics that I think represents Ella, Teo, and Javier. And actually it's interesting because these themes have been brought up again and again today, using just different words for the same thing. I would say purpose. They're all driven by a goal to make the world a better place. Ella's representing marginalized artisans. Teo wants to build a better Nigeria by creating the infrastructure that's necessary to help the business the economy function. Javier wants to cure everybody of diabetes in Mexico. And there were some other words that we used today that came up in conversation that represent the same thing. Inspiration, I think we mentioned, and identity. This is all part of the same thing. It's this drive, this purpose is beyond yourself. And so the second is principle. I mentioned that these entrepreneurs aren't just creating jobs, they're creating good jobs. Capitalism has a bad name for itself because the leaders behind some of these large corporations aren't thinking about why they're there and who they can help and how they can help. And I think these leaders, the new generation of leaders, have this principled mindset where, again, and I'm stealing a quote from John Mackey, the CEO, former CEO of Whole Foods, and he said that it is about, you need to create a business where the profits drive the mission doesn't drive the profits. And I really do believe that. And I think that the entrepreneurs today have that mindset. And the final one is persistence. And again, we used another word that's come up again and again, resilience and persistence. And this, with the purpose in mind, that drives persistence. These entrepreneurs, Javier just shared with me, he was close to bankruptcy 4 times over the last 4 years, but he kept going because he had this larger purpose in mind. So to kind of move into the last part of what I wanted to share with you today, the question that we ask ourselves at MIT and as entrepreneurship educators is, how do you build the values, these principled values and morals and ethics, and the skills to help entrepreneurs succeed? How do you build this into the curriculum and the workshops that we run on the ground for entrepreneurs to help the entrepreneurs find their way? And I think that there are kind of 3 pieces that I've pulled out of what we do at MIT, and I've seen it all around the world, that I wanted to kind of touch on. The first is discovery. And I think discovery ties very closely into purpose. We as entrepreneurship educators have to commit time to helping our children and our students discover, and ourselves, discover purpose. And the way that we do that at the Legatum Center is by having a conversation, understanding, and this is another theme that's come up again and again today, is understanding the problem, understanding the customer, those you serve, and finding out what the crux of the problem is. So we run events like the one we've got coming up in November around neglected tropical diseases, and how we can help connect several billion people with the drugs and the care that they need to wipe out these diseases on the planet. We host workshops. We send students to the field to spend multiple weeks in testing their products, doing primary market research, understanding the customer, finding ways to serve the community. The second thing that I think we do, that we pay attention to, obviously as an academic institution, is education. And we have this saying at MIT, and particularly in the entrepreneurship community at MIT, which is, give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. And I should probably switch out him for him and her, because it's far more appropriate. But I think that this statement resonates with, I think it's true, and we've got data that shows that. This is data, the number of businesses that have been started by MIT alumni over time, and we've highlighted students who start businesses 3 years after graduation, 5 years after graduation, 10 years after graduation, and what we're finding is that the majority of successful businesses are founded 5-10 years after graduation, not during school, even though you may start something. As all entrepreneurs know, most first businesses fail. The second one may be okay, and the third one is the one that ends up scaling. And here, what's important is not the commitment that we've made as entrepreneurship educators to the business, it's about the skills that they're developing. And I think that that is something that we've kind of embedded into our curriculum. It's about the entrepreneur, not the entrepreneurship. So just a few ways that we're doing that at MIT is we're connecting our entrepreneurs with faculty and connecting them with frameworks for how to build strategies for building successful businesses, how to create good jobs, not just jobs that make economic sense, business sense, but also moral and ethical sense. We run classes where we bring and celebrate entrepreneurial role models, something that's inspired me today. And then we connect them with mentors. So the final piece of this is celebration, and I think that this is what today has been all about. And again, we run big events to celebrate our entrepreneurs. We celebrate the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world too much. They're great companies, but what we really need to do is be inclusive about the entrepreneurs that we celebrate, both events but also online. So I've got one more point to kind of end in order to close. I did start writing my letter to Penny, and I won't read the whole thing to you. But I think this might capture some of the points that I've kind of mentioned today. So I start by saying so, and I actually should ask you to come and read it because you're far better at. But so, my lovely Penny, some advice for you that you may add to your depository of ideas and inspiration for the future. One is invest time in discovering and now and again reminding yourself of your purpose. Explore and experiment, expose yourself to the world and get to know the people who live within it, and find something that you care about, something you're passionate about. No matter how big or small, do something that you believe in. Whether it's a question that you want answered, a person that you want to help, a community that you want to serve, this purpose will drive you, make you work harder, and make you stay more focused. It will it will keep you grounded and principled and help you fuel your persistence. Number 2 is commit to a lifelong learning. Invest in your education, your IQ and your EQ, so your human and intellectual capacity, and listen and learn from those around you, just as we've been talking about this afternoon. And to do this, to build not just your skill set, but your value set. The better informed you are, the better your knowledge and experience toolkit, and the better equipped you are to serve your purpose if you invest in your education. And finally, on a more personal note, someone told me recently, when I had a moment of self-doubt, I'm too young to be doing this, I'm too inexperienced, I don't know what I'm doing, I'd had a really tough week and had to make some pretty tough decisions. And she said to me, she said, look what you're doing now and the impact that you're having. But more importantly, look at what you're learning by being a part of this movement, and think about that in the context of what you'll be doing when you're 50 years old. And for me, that was kind of a game-changing piece of advice for someone to give me. So, touch one person's life today, 100 tomorrow, 1,000 over the course of a lifetime. And I think that that's important lesson for us all. So my final piece of advice for my daughter is enjoy the journey and keep smiling. So thank you, everybody.